Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I am so excited that you're here. I'm Dr. Sarah, your host for this event. I'm a board certified occupational therapist and myofascial release practitioner. And my passion is chronic pain. And that's what we're going to be talking about this week. I have an awesome lineup of speakers for you guys. And I'm going to kick it off today. So if you have questions, throw them up in the Facebook group. I can get them on my StreamYard. But I'm not sure if I'll see them right away, and I will try to answer them all. So if I don't see them right away, I'll come back at the end and make sure that I've seen everything. I'm trying to make sure everybody's in the group that's trying to get in. And I'll also be keeping an eye on the comments in Facebook on my phone, so hopefully I won't miss any. Hopefully. Okay, so I hope you guys are having a great start to your week. Now the clock is going to go. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about fascia. That is what I primarily work with when I'm doing myofascial release. And you're going to find out why it's so important and why it's missing from traditional healthcare. So, without any further ado, let's start. So what is fascia? Fascia is this sticky, kind of dense connective tissue. You find it everywhere in your body, top to bottom, side to side, front to back. It wraps all the way down to the cellular level, around your muscles, around your nerves, around your blood vessels. It's everywhere in your body. And it has several main purposes. Primarily, protection. So when you slip on the ice and you fall on your tailbone, your fascia around your tailbone is going to squish out all of its fluid, and it's going to tighten up to protect all of those areas that have been injured. And that also facilitates healing. It helps bring in fluid, and it just prevents any further injury while those tissues are recovering. The next is proprioception, and that's just a fancy word for knowing where your body is in space. So when you reach over to turn on the light in the dark, you can find the lamp without looking. Or all day long, as you move through your space, you're making little adjustments to not hit your hip on the doorknob or run into the cabinet or things like that. So your fascia, because it is so integrated throughout your body, talks to all of your nerves and your muscles. It's sending those messages to your brain to help you know where you are. And reducing friction. I love this polar bear. So your fascia will wrap around each of your muscles individually as well as your muscle groups. So you have like 16 muscles in your forearm. Work all your fingers, move your wrist. And so you will have fascia around each of those and then around that group as a whole. So when you contract those muscles, so if I just want to move one finger or two fingers, those muscles slide along each other and they don't cause friction. And the last one is structure. So we think a lot about our skeleton. Our bones provide our structure. And that's true. But if you think about the tent, the poles do provide the structure. But at the same time, without the tent itself, those poles wouldn't really be able to do anything. They would just be poles. So just like in your body, your bones are important. They provide a lot of structure. They provide the tool for your muscles to use essentially to have leverage. But your bones don't necessarily hold you together. Your fascia does. And this tensegrity is the idea of how that works with your fascia holding you together. So it's a combination of the words tension and integrity. And they have some really awesome sculptures. And you can see how the solid parts don't connect. They're not touching. They're only held together by the strings. So the tension on the strings allows the structure to remain as a whole. And your thick lines of fascia, which look like this, are the pieces of fascia that really do that. So you have two types of fascia. You have loose fascia, which is kind of the more, it's all over your body, up under your skin, around your muscles, around your organs. And then you have deeper fascia, like this. So you can see in this first one, it goes all the way from his toes on the bottom of his foot, up his legs and his back, and it actually reaches all the way around the back of your head to the front of your skull, to your forehead. So that back, superficial back line reaches all the way around your back to your front. And it provides resistance for movement and structure for movement. And so it's a really important part of your body. And historically, fascia was something that conventional medicine didn't really care about. It was something that had to be cut away so that you could get to the more important stuff that they were trying to learn about, like your blood vessels and your organs and your bones and all the other stuff in your body. They didn't care about the fascia. It was just in the way. And now we're starting to learn that not only is it important as connective tissue to hold you together, but it's important because it has all of those other purposes. Our bodies are not just a conglomeration of parts. They're a synergetic work of art where each piece is reliant on the function of the other pieces. And so your fascia is actually way more important than they ever expected. And it's finally starting to come to the forefront, which is awesome because it's related to so many things. So a few habits, these are the most important things that you can do to support healthy fascia. First is drinking enough water. Like we talked about with slipping on the ice, your fascia is supposed to be this really hydrated, wet system. So if your body doesn't have enough water, if it's not readily available, it might pull water from your brain, which is your second most hydrated, your most hydrated part of your body. And that can cause headaches and fatigue and dizziness and confusion. Excuse me. And for your fascia, when you get injured, it squishes out all that fluid. For it to loosen up and return to a normal state, it needs that hydration. So drinking enough water is really important. Regular varied movement. Modern society has made us so comfortable, and it's entirely to our detriment. You know, we're not using our bodies to the level that they're designed to be used at. You know, we're not going out and hunting for our food anymore. We're not climbing mountains all the time. We get up and we sit in the car on the drive to work, and then we sit in our office chairs, and then we sit and drive home, and then we sit and eat dinner, and then we sit and watch TV. So if you think about the amount of movement that you get kind of in your daily life, it's really limited compared to what your body's capable of. You get some bending and some reaching. I'm only 5'2", so I get a lot of reaching. Much more than my husband, who's 6 feet tall. But in the grand scheme, it's really not a lot of movement. Paying attention to your posture. So one of the things about fascia is that it doesn't know what's an injury and what isn't an injury. So if you're constantly sitting with your head forward because you're working on your computer, it's going to get tight in the front because it's shortening, but it's also going to get tight in the back because it's trying to provide that structure. Because your head's so heavy, it's trying to provide a counterbalance from your muscles having to work. And so what you're going to get is it's going to start pulling your spine. It's going to start changing the curvature of your spine. And this is just the most obvious example because, you know, people on their phones all the time leaning over, and tech neck is the new thing. So making sure that you're sitting upright, that you're not craning your neck forward all day long, because your fascia is going to remember. It's kind of like Play-Doh. So you can sit and play with Play-Doh for hours as long as you're working it regularly. If you make something and you set it aside, it's going to dry out. Your fascia is kind of the same way. If you're moving regularly and you're taking breaks and you're getting a lot of different movement, you're working that fascia all over. Whereas if you're not, if you're sitting all day long and then you're sitting in the evening and then you just go to bed, that fascia isn't getting the movement that it needs to stay healthy. And sleep. Everybody needs sleep. We actually have somebody who's coming to talk about sleep, and I'm super excited about it because I am a terrible sleeper. I've always been a terrible sleeper. My kids are terrible sleepers. Maybe it's genetic. I don't know. Quality sleep is important for so many things, though. Your stress level, your emotional regulation, your cognitive abilities, and your fascia, because overall, when your body is more stressed, you maintain a higher level of tension, which translates into your fascia. And then you end up with tightness and chronic pain and stiffness, and it's just overall a bad combination. So also managing your stress. You need to find ways to be able to manage the stress that you have in your everyday life. We all have it. We all struggle with things, but they need to be dealt with, right? And diaphragmatic breathing. So it's another fancy word for belly breathing. Your diaphragm is a big muscle at the bottom of your ribs. It's a dome shape. And so when it contracts, it pulls down. And that's what inflates your lungs. But what happens is with modern society, we are so wrapped up in skinny waists and, sticking out our chests. And what happens is when you suck in your tummy, you're not using your diaphragm to breathe anymore. You're using your chest muscles and your intercostal muscles, the muscles between your ribs. And so typically, your secondary muscles for breathing are only used in emergency situations. The mountain lion's coming. I got to run. I need to recruit everything that I have to oxygenate my muscles to help me get away. So the snowball effect is that because you're using those secondary muscles, your brain is confused and turns on your stress level. It ups your stress level. So it's kind of a snowball effect. Like I said, it just contributes to your overall situation. Varied movement. I mean, the amount of movement that our bodies are capable of is so amazing to me. I mean, I'm not a contortionist. I struggle with yoga most days. But one of the things that I think is important to highlight is that a lot of the movement that we lose as adults is because we stopped doing it at some point when we were kids. My kids are so much more flexible, so much more bendy, so much more resilient. But that's because partially because they're getting so much more movement than I am. They go out and they run around all day and they jump on the trampoline and they play on the monkey bars and they're climbing up the little rock wall on their play set. And I'm not doing any of those things, so my body isn't getting that movement. So lots of different kinds of movement is so important. Restriction. So what happens when fascia goes bad? We've talked about how it squishes out all its fluid and protects injury. But what happens when it doesn't get better? Or with chronic injury, what happens is you get like these knots. So if you look at my shirt on the left, it's nice and smooth, fitted. So then if you have one restriction, maybe it's not so much of a big deal. It doesn't really change the shirt that much. But you can see that even though the knot is in one little spot, the wrinkles in the shirt go much farther than that. And that's the relationship that fascia has to pain. So where you're experiencing pain, if it's related to your fascia, is not necessarily where your problem is. Because your fascia might be pulling on structures which are pulling on other structures, which is causing pain. So like in the last photo, chances are you don't just have one spot that's tight. You probably have a whole bunch. I have a whole bunch and I work on it all the time. And so it's a compound effect where now it's pulling and scrunching and displacing so much more. So some chronic issues that might be associated with your fascia are thoracic outlet syndrome. So there's a tiny little space in between your collarbone and your first rib where all these super important structures go through. And terrible design, at least for this part, because if you get any amount of pressure or tension or misalignment in that area, you can get nerve compression, which is going to cause numbness or tingling or muscle loss, weak muscles down the arm, all of those things. If you get compression of the blood vessels, you're going to get tissue damage and weakness and numbness and pain. And if you look at conventional treatment for this, it'll say that a lot of the time they're not sure what causes it. It can be caused by like a specific accident. If you get into a car accident and you have trauma to your shoulder. But there's a lot of times where they don't actually know why you have thoracic outlet syndrome. And surgery comes up a lot to fix it. When if you focus on realigning, I mean, you can realign your entire shoulder girdle, which when you sit forward and you're working here and your shoulder's round, this is not proper alignment, and so it's affecting the entire shoulder into my chest, into my neck, really. So if we focus on straightening our posture, getting our alignment correct, opening up the fascia that gets tight because of our posture, then this might not be such an issue that needs surgery. Trigger points and muscle spasms. This is probably the most obvious one. We've all probably experienced the knots we get in our back. You get a tight spot, it's tender. It's not actually your muscle, it's the fascia around that muscle, because it's either sensed damage or a little bit of inflammation from overuse or something like that, and so it's tightened down to try to protect it. But if we're not stretching it out and drinking enough water and providing the environment that it needs to go back to normal, then it becomes a chronic issue. And this is also related to muscle spasms, because some research has indicated that those muscle spasms happen when a muscle that's already tight tries to contract further. And so it kind of goes a little haywire and freaks out because it has nowhere to go. And so when your fascia is tight and it's compressing your muscle, and then you try to recruit that muscle to do something, it just has a little panic, and it's significantly painful. It can put people out for a long time. But if we focus on the fascia, which is the actual problem, then we can relieve the pain, we can correct the misalignment, we can release the tension on the muscle that will allow it to go back to functioning properly. Fibromyalgia. This is one of those diagnoses for me that's so frustrating, because I think it started out as you have this widespread chronic pain and we don't know why, so we're going to slap a diagnosis on it and tell you we don't have any way to treat it. There have been some medications that have been released that work. And when I say work, I think the research said that it reduced pain by 30%, which is not a lot. When you're in pain, you want the pain gone. But the thing about fibromyalgia is it's a widespread neurological condition where your nerves, your pain receptors, are sensing damage or they're being triggered for some reason. And your fascia, which wraps around all those nerves and has pain receptors in it, is helping to convey that information. So by focusing on the fascia, you can release the tension on the system, which will calm those nerves and stop those signals from being sent. And I have worked with a number of people with fibromyalgia who tried the medications, who went to their doctor, who tried chiropractic, who did a whole bunch of other things, who were not able to find relief for it until they started dealing with their fascia and learning about how to take care of their bodies so that they were as healthy as they could be. Osteoarthritis. This one, so your fascia or having tight fascia or having dysfunctional fascia is not going to cause osteoarthritis. However, when you become out of alignment, when you don't have correct posture. And I'm going to use knees as a reference for this because most people have wonky aligned knees because your knees are supposed to be aligned a certain way. And when your leg is twisted, your hip is tight, it gets a little off kilter. And what happens then is every time you walk, those bones are grinding against each other more than they should be. So by releasing the fascia and correcting the alignment, you reduce that friction in those joints. You reduce your risk of osteoarthritis. You reduce the age of onset of osteoarthritis. You reduce the pain once you have osteoarthritis because those joints are moving where they're supposed to be now. And so even though it's not necessarily caused by fascia, I wanted to throw it in here because it is a widespread diagnosis. I mean, it's one of those things that as you get older, you're kind of just like, yeah, I'm probably going to have arthritis at some point. You know, we're living longer these days, and there's a lot of wear and tear on your joints. But if you get your alignment correct, there can be so much less. Pain or stiffness in the morning. This is a big one. A lot of people, I've talked to so many people who are like, I just don't feel good when my body hurts when I wake up in the morning, and I've tried pillows, and I've tried a different mattress, or I've tried all these props at night to try to help me get comfortable. But what's happening is it's more important to consider the things that you do during the day. If your fascia is tight somewhere and then you go to sleep and your body relaxes, that fascia gets pulled, and so then it's pulling on the other structures that it's connected to. So it's transferring that pain, it's making you achy. And if you don't release the tension that you have, you're never going to be able to get comfortable at night because as your body relaxes, it's relaxing into that tension instead of allowing it to just find space. A word of caution. So there are a lot of tools on the market right now that are aimed at self-care at home. And I just wanted to throw in a little word about kind of how I feel about them, the experiences that I've had, a combination of my education and my knowledge of the body, because there's the potential to do a lot of damage. So the first one is a foam roller. I'm not keen on foam rollers. I know a lot of people use them, but what happens is when you just have one of those straight, flat foam rollers, you're just smooshing your tissues together. They don't have anywhere to go. You're not releasing anything. You're just smashing it. So if you love foam rolling, if it's been good for you, maybe try getting one that has a little more texture, because that will allow the tissue that you're rolling some space to go and some space to move. And you can use it to get in and work on the fascia. The fascia blaster. In addition to as an occupational therapist, I'm also a certified lymphedema therapist. So we're going to talk about your lymph system later this week. But the first part of your lymph system is really superficial. It's right under your skin. And when you get treatment for lymphedema, the manual part of it is so soft. It's like when you stroke a baby's head, brand new, day-old baby. You're going to stroke his head. That's how much pressure you use to work on the lymph system. So these fascia blasters, I haven't done much research into them because they just make me so nervous. But the idea is that you're going to grind away at your fascia, and your fascia doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to what we call a low load, long duration. So mild to moderate stretch over a longer length of time, 30 seconds, a minute, up to several minutes, for it to relax and accept that there's no danger and reconstruct those fibers in a way that's more organized. So the fascia blaster is probably just going to do more damage than good. And I think they have a lawsuit against them already. But I know they're still out there, and I know they're still selling, and it does not have anything to actually do with your fascia. It's marketing. Lacrosse balls. So you can use a ball to work into those tissues and find the knots. and stretch out your fascia, but please don't use a lacrosse ball. They're super hard rubber, and if you're not careful, you're just going to end up causing yourself unintentional injury because they're just so hard. There are therapy balls, and I'll talk about those in a second. You can use a tennis ball. A tennis ball is better than a lacrosse ball because it's softer, it has a little bit more give, but therapy balls are really not that expensive, and you're best probably just to get some of those if this is a technique that you want to use. Inversion tables. I feel like these have kind of gone out of style. I could be wrong about that. Traction on your spine, allowing your spine to decompress, feels really good. I feel like inversion tables just have there's so many ways it could go wrong. Whether you flip out of it and land on your head, or you spend too much time upside down and then you don't feel good. They're just generally not worth it in the long run for me and what I recommend to my clients. So the tools that I use are therapy balls. I use these all the time. They come in like smooth ones. They come in different sizes. You can get ones with little nubbies on them. I actually have the therapy balls up on the right that come in the little mesh bag. Those are the ones that I use personally. And they're great because they're a good size. They're pretty squishy. I should have brought them over here to show you. And they're a little bit tacky, so when you're using them, they don't try to slide out from underneath you. The nubby ones can be good, but it's really personal preference if that feels better for you or if it doesn't. And then when we get further along and we talk about how to use the therapy balls, I'll also tell you about how to increase the pressure, decrease the pressure, depending on how you're feeling when you're using them. The half roll. I do love a half roll. So when we went back and when we looked at the thick lines of fascia, the superficial back line goes up your calf, back of your leg, and because we spend so much of our day sitting, the back of the leg and the calf are one of those areas that's super tight, and this translates into an incorrect gait. So you're walking funny, or you're increasing the pressure in your joints because your muscles don't have the mobility that they need to have. So the half roll is great because you can put your foot up on it, put your heel on the floor, and it simulates walking. It's the same kind of mechanical shape that you use when you're moving. And stretching in the way that you use it is the most effective because it seems so obvious and now I can't explain it to you. Because that's the way you're going to use the muscle. Why wouldn't you stretch it that way? So the half roll is also good because if you need to prop yourself up on it, you can prop yourself up a little bit if you're trying to do a different stretch. So I do love a half roll. And the neck hammock. My primary issue is my neck, probably from too much of this. The neck hammock is the alternative to the inversion table where you can lay down on the floor, you cradle your head. You can use it anywhere in your house as long as you have like a doorknob or something. It doesn't need a whole lot of space. You pack it up and throw it wherever you can. But it still provides that decompression of your spine. And it's better than the inversion table because for your fascia to kind of reconstruct and get back to normal, you need to be able to relax. It's all about relaxing. And for me, when I'm upside down, I don't feel very relaxed. But if I can lay on the floor, I can turn on some music, I can put on an eye mask or something, then I know I'm 100% relaxed, and it's much more effective that way. Heat versus ice. I also wanted to talk about heat versus ice because I think it's something that's used a lot, but some people don't necessarily know how to use it correctly. So if you're like the guy in the beginning who slipped on the ice and he fell, you know the mechanism of injury, you know where the injury is. So it's new, there's swelling, you definitely want to use ice. If you use heat, that's going to increase your inflammation, which is going to make it take longer for you to heal. But if you wake up one day and you're suddenly achy, you're not really sure why, it might be better to try to use heat first, because your problem is probably more likely related to a tightness or a tension. It's achy. It needs to be relaxed, and that's what heat does. So maybe start with heat. So for fascia, I use a lot more heat than I use ice. However, generally speaking, they're both pretty safe. If you have a preference for one or the other, you can use either. But I wouldn't put heat on a brand new injury when you know how it happened. And with both, definitely you can do about 15 minutes at a time, maybe 3 to 4 times a day. I wouldn't go more than that. And just be careful and make sure that you're checking your skin pretty regularly to make sure that you're not getting any burns or causing any damage to your tissue. So ultimately, it's up to you. You can do either, neither, or both. Myths and facts. Let's see. Oh, no pain, no gain. Fascia, like I mentioned earlier, is not about powering through it. It is one of the strongest forces in the body, and you are not going to break it apart. What's going to happen is you're going to cause damage to all of the other tissues that it's connected to. So it's really about taking your time. It shouldn't ever hurt, like your body is telling you this is a bad thing, we shouldn't be doing this. A lot of people can recognize a kind of therapeutic pain, like, oh, it hurts so good. Sometimes it can be a little stretchy feeling, or, and it's interesting because sometimes I'll be working on somebody like on their arm, and they'll say, hey, I can feel that in my opposite leg, because your fascia is all connected. And so it's not about muscling through it. It's about giving it time, taking it easy, and doing the right things. And they shouldn't hurt. We kind of already talked about this one. The pain is where the problem is, and that's where treatment should be focused. When I have a new client who comes in for myofascial release therapy, the first day I always do head to toe, because they can tell me about their history and what they do every day, and I can kind of get an idea of where their tension's going to be, but there are always surprises. And when you're working on somebody else, you kind of get used to what bodies feel like and what tension feels like under the skin. And so I can work down their body, and I can tell where their tension is and whether or not that might be contributing to the pain that they're having. So when you're doing self-myofascial release, or you go to see a myofascial release practitioner, chances are you're going to have to do more than just the area that hurts, because that's probably not the area that's causing the pain. It's probably not where the problem actually is. You only need to work during your appointment. When I was finishing my degree and doing my field work, I did a lot of different rotations in several different settings. I did outpatient, I did inpatient, I did ICU. And one of the things about people who get therapy is they kind of seem to think that they really only have to work when they're with their therapist. And that is not true, because your wellness, your health, is the combination of your routines and your rituals and the things that you do every day. It's how much you pay attention to your posture. It's how much water you drink. It's the nutrition that you give yourself. It's how you respond to your body when it's been injured. And so it's really about making a commitment to learning the steps that you need and the tools that you need to be able to take care of yourself, and doing that every day consistently. Because your fascia, generally speaking, doesn't get out of whack overnight. Your Play-Doh doesn't dry instantly. It takes time, and it takes time to reverse that effect as well. And so you need to be consistent in your action and have a plan for how you're going to do it. Your wellness is a combination of your daily rituals, You got to have that plan, and you got to know what you need to do, and you got to do it every day. I went a little fast through that. Does anybody have any questions for me? I didn't see any come up in the Facebook group, but it looks like it's a little bit laggy, so I will hold up and see if anything comes up. Otherwise, that is it for me this morning, but we have lots more coming today. Ooh, Savannah wants to know, is there any research about more traditional PAMS, which is a physical agent modality, being good or bad for fascia? That is a great question. You know, we kind of talked about the heat in the ice, which is a thermal modality. And then I don't know if I've seen any research about like TENS, although when I had my neck problems and I went in for physical therapy, what she did was she put the TENS on and then she put some ice on my neck, and I sat there for my entire physical therapy session. And it did work, but the problem with that approach was that she didn't address the things that I was doing every day that was causing my alignment to be off, that was causing the inflammation in my neck, that was causing the pain that I was having. So I would think that TENS could probably be good. I'm not sure about E-stim, because I would think that if you have tension anywhere, adding E-stim to it would cause that muscle to contract and spasm. But that's definitely something that I would have to look into. That looks like all the questions. If you guys have questions that come up later on, or you're watching the replay, throw them up in the comments and I will check back regularly to see if anything came up, and I'll reply to you in the Facebook group and let you know what I think. And so thanks for watching. I will see you in about 2.5 hours. Bye.